Question 1. During an emergency response where multiple areas are impacted, a municipality invokes its power of eminent domain to seize private property for a public infrastructure project. The property owner challenges the seizure, claiming that the government failed to provide just compensation. Under constitutional law, which of the following principles governs the legal standard for determining whether the property owner's claim is valid? A. The Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. B. The Takings Clause of the 5th Amendment. C. The Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution. D. The Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Answer. B. The Takings Clause of the 5th Amendment. Explanation. The Takings Clause of the 5th Amendment states that private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. This clause ensures that when the government exercises eminent domain, it must fairly compensate property owners for their loss. The Supreme Court has interpreted this clause in cases such as Kelo v. City of New London, 2005, established that the government can take property for public use, but compensation must be provided. 8. Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment ensures fair procedures in legal proceedings but does not specifically address compensation for takings. C. Supremacy Clause establishes that federal law overrides state law but does not deal with property seizures. D. Commerce Clause regulates interstate commerce and is irrelevant to eminent domain. The Takings Clause is the governing standard for assessing whether the government must compensate the property. Question 2. When implementing new protocols in a shared environment, a commercial property owner discovers that a neighboring property has gradually extended its fence onto their land over the past 25 years. The owner files a lawsuit to reclaim the land, but the neighbor claims legal ownership through reverse possession. Under general property law principles, which of the following conditions must the neighbor satisfy to successfully claim ownership? A. The occupation must be continuous, open, notorious, exclusive, and hostile for the statutory period. B. The property owner must have given written consent for the encroachment. C. The occupation must be done with the express knowledge and approval of the legal owner. D. The encroaching party must pay property taxes on the land for a minimum of 50 years. Answer A. The occupation must be continuous, open, notorious, exclusive, and hostile for the statutory period. Explanation. Inverse possession laws allow a person to gain legal ownership of land if they meet certain conditions over a state statutory period, which is often between 10 to 30 years, depending on jurisdiction. The essential elements are continuous. The possession must be uninterrupted for the statutory period. Open and notorious. The occupation must be visible and obvious to anyone, including the legal owner. Exclusive. The claimant must act as though they are the sole owner without sharing possession. Hostile. The use must be without the owner's permission but does not require animosity. B. Written consent. If permission was given, the occupation is not hostile and inverse possession fails. C. Express knowledge and approval. The owner's approval negates hostility requirement. D. Paying property taxes for 50 years. Some states require tax payments, but 50 years is excessive and not universal rule. Thus is the correct answer based on legal precedent in adverse possession cases. Question 3. While analyzing the root causes of sequential problems in commercial leasing, a tenant discovers that their lease contract contains a clause allowing the landlord to evict them at any time with a 30-day notice even though they have paid rent on time. The tenant challenges the enforceability of the clause, arguing that it contradicts their rights under leasehold estate principles. Which type of tenancy is most likely in effect based on this clause? A. Tenancy for years. B. Periodic tenancy. C. Tenancy at will. D. Tenancy in common. Answer. C. Tenancy at will. Explanation. A tenancy at will exists when there is no fixed-term lease agreement and either party can terminate the lease at any time, typically with reasonable notice. The landlord's ability to terminate the lease with 30 days' notice suggests that the arrangement lacks definite duration, which is characteristic of tenancy at will. Tenancy for years, fixed-term lease, e.g. 12 months, 5 years, that cannot be terminated early without breach of contract. The question suggests no fixed term. B. Periodic tenancy. Renews automatically at set intervals, e.g. month to month, but requires notice period aligned with rental cycles, not arbitrary eviction. D. Tenancy in common. Form of ownership, not leasehold estate where multiple people hold undivided interests in property. Tenancy at will allows either the landlord or tenant to end the lease at any time, making C the correct answer. Question 4. During an emergency response where multiple areas are impacted, a local government exercises its authority to rezone a residential neighborhood to allow for emergency commercial use, such as temporary medical facilities and supply centers. However, multiple property owners file a lawsuit arguing that this rezoning constitutes a regulatory taking and violates their property rights. Given these circumstances, under what legal principle the court most likely evaluate the claims of the property owners? A. The public trust doctrine. B. Eminent domain under the takings clause. C. The doctrine of equitable conversion. D. The rule against perpetuities. Answer: B. Eminent domain under the takings clause. Explanation: the takings clause of the Fifth Amendment states, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." When the government enacts zoning changes that significantly limit the economic use of private property, it may be considered a regulatory taking under the case law established in Penn Central Transportation Company v. New York City No. 78. Courts typically evaluate economic impact. How significantly does the zoning change affect the property's value? Investment-backed expectations. Did the owners have reasonable expectations that were disrupted? Character of government action. Is the action designed to protect public welfare, or does it unfairly burden specific property owners? Here, the government's need for emergency relief may justify the zoning change under police powers, but if the impact is extreme, courts may require just compensation. Other answer choices are incorrect because A. The public trust doctrine relates to government stewardship of natural resources. C. The doctrine of equitable conversion applies to contract law in real estate transactions. D. The rule against perpetuities limits future property interests, not government takings. Question 5. While investigating inconsistencies across various units in a condominium association, a dispute arises regarding a developer's failure to transfer control of the homeowners association to unit owners after majority of units have been sold. The developer argues that they retain control under an extended transition clause in the Declaration of Covenants. Which of the following legal principles or statutes is most relevant? Resolving this dispute: A. The Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act, ILSA. B. The Common Interest Ownership Act, UCO. C. The Statute of Frauds. D. The Marketable Title Act. Answer: B. The Common Interest Ownership Act, UCO. Explanation: the Uniform Common Interest Ownership Act, UCO, governs the creation, management, and transfer of control in condominiums, coops, and planned communities. Under UCO, a developer control of an home must be relinquished when a specified percentage, often 75% of units, are sold to ensure that unit owners have decision-making power. Courts assess whether the transition delay violates fiduciary obligations owed by the developer to the HOA. Other options are incorrect. A. ILSA regulates pre-construction sales of subdivisions but does not govern HOA control transfers. C. The Statute of Frauds requires certain contracts to be in writing but does not apply to HOA governance. D. The Marketable Title Act addresses outdated claims on land, not HOA disputes. Question 6. When implementing new protocols in a shared environment, a city government revises zoning ordinances to prohibit certain industrial activities in residential adjacent zones. A manufacturing company, which has operated in the area for decades, challenges the ordinance, arguing that it constitutes an unlawful restriction on its vested rights. Under what legal doctrine might the company argue for its continued operations? A. Doctrine of prior non-conforming use. B. Doctrine of laches. C. Parallel evidence rule. D. Feudal tenure doctrine. Answer: A. Doctrine of prior non-conforming use. Explanation: the doctrine of prior non-conforming use allows a property owner to continue an existing use of land if the use was lawful before a new zoning restriction was enacted. Many jurisdictions provide that such a use may continue unless the non-conforming use is abandoned for a set period. The property is substantially modified beyond its original purpose. The zoning law includes sunset provision mandating eventual compliance. Other options are incorrect. B. Doctrine of laches prevents claims from being pursued after unreasonable delays. C. Parallel evidence rule restricts the use of outside evidence in contract interpretation. D. Feudal tenure doctrine is an outdated land ownership concept from medieval England. Question 7. In a high-stakes environment where multiple challenges affect real estate transactions, a buyer discovers that a seller failed to disclose an ongoing boundary dispute with an adjacent landowner. The buyer sues, claiming the property's title is unmarketable. Which legal principle best supports the buyer's claim? A. Caveat emptor, buyer beware. B. Marketable title doctrine. C. Easement by prescription. D. Constructive eviction. Answer: B. Marketable title doctrine. Explanation: a marketable title is one free from legal disputes that could threaten ownership. A boundary dispute creates uncertainty, making the title unmarketable. Courts generally require sellers to disclose such issues unless explicitly waived by contract. Other options are incorrect. A. Caveat emptor applies, but many states now impose disclosure obligations on sellers. C. Easement by prescription applies when land is used openly and notoriously for its statutory period but is not directly relevant here. D. Constructive eviction concerns a tenant's inability to use leased property due to landlord actions. Question 8. During a comprehensive review of a process that needs improvement, a real estate developer challenges an environmental regulation restricting new construction near wetlands. The developer argues that the restriction constitutes an excessive burden on their land and amounts to an unconstitutional taking. Under which landmark Supreme Court case is the constitutionality of such regulations most often assessed? A. Lucas v. South Carolina Coastal Council 1992. B. Shelley v. Creamer 1948. C. Kelo v. City of New London 2005. D. Marbury v. Madison 1803. Answer A. Lucas v. South Carolina Coastal Council 1992. Explanation: in Lucas, the Supreme Court ruled that if a regulation completely eliminates all economically viable use of land, it constitutes a categorical regulatory taking under the Fifth Amendment. However, environmental protections can still be upheld if they align with background principles of property law. Other cases are incorrect. B. Shelley v. Creamer deals with racial covenants in real estate. C. Kelo v. City of New London concerns eminent domain for economic development. D. Marbury v. Madison established judicial review unrelated to real property. Question 9. During a complex negotiation where multiple parties have interest in a property, a dispute arises over whether a tenant's long-term lease includes an option to purchase. The lease agreement is ambiguous and the landlord argues that no such right exists. Under which legal principle will the court likely analyze the enforceability of the tenant's claim? A. Doctrine of part performance. B. Parallel evidence rule. C. Rule against perpetuities. D. Adverse possession. Answer: B. Parallel evidence rule. Explanation: the parallel evidence rule prevents parties from introducing prior verbal agreements to contradict a written contract unless an ambiguity exists. Courts will analyze the lease language, intent of the parties, and any extrinsic evidence if necessary. Other options are incorrect. A. Doctrine of part performance applies to oral contracts when significant actions suggest an agreement existed. C. Rule against perpetuities limits the duration of future interests in land. D. Adverse possession concerns gaining title through long-term occupation. Question 10. While reviewing a process that needs improvement, a city planning board revises zoning laws leading to a dispute between a property owner and the local government. The owner argues that the new restrictions reduce their property's value. Under what legal doctrine might the property owner challenge the zoning change? A. Doctrine of unjust enrichment. B. Eminent domain under the takings clause. C. Prior non-conforming use doctrine. D. Statute of frauds. Answer: B. Eminent domain under the takings clause. Explanation: if a zoning law significantly reduces a property's economic value, courts may evaluate whether it constitutes regulatory taking under the Fifth Amendment. The case Penn Central v. New York 1978 set standards for determining takings. Other options are incorrect. A. Doctrine of unjust enrichment applies to contract disputes. C. Prior non-conforming use doctrine protects pre-existing land uses but does not apply to all zoning changes. D. Statute of frauds governs written contract requirements, not land use regulation. Question 11. In a high-stakes environment where multiple legal issues impact a transaction, a property owner grants an easement allowing a neighbor to use a private driveway. Years later, the neighbor builds a permanent structure on the easement without permission. Under which principle can the property owner challenge this action? A. Doctrine of easement termination. B. Covenant of quiet enjoyment. C. Constructive eviction. D. Marketable title doctrine. Answer A. Doctrine of easement termination. Explanation: an easement does not grant ownership rights, and exceeding its scope may lead to termination. Courts examine whether the use materially burdens the servient estate, whether the easement holder acted in bad faith. Other options are incorrect. B. Covenant of quiet enjoyment applies to landlord-tenant disputes. C. Constructive eviction concerns a landlord's failure to maintain habitability. D. Marketable title doctrine ensures property's title is free from legal disputes. Question 12. While implementing new protocols in a shared environment, a landlord decides to change the terms of an ongoing lease by increasing rent midterm without tenant consent. Under which legal principle is this action likely to be unenforceable? A. Doctrine of lashes. B. Covenant of seisin. C. Doctrine of consideration in contract law. D. Equitable conversion. Answer: C. Doctrine of consideration in contract law. Explanation: lease agreements are binding contracts, and midterm rent increases without consideration, i.e., an exchange of value, are unenforceable unless the lease expressly allows modifications. Other options are incorrect. A. Doctrine of lashes concerns delays in bringing legal claims. B. Covenant of seisin ensures a seller has legal ownership. D. Equitable conversion applies in real estate sales when a buyer has equitable title. Question 13. During an emergency response where multiple properties are impacted, a local government seizes private land to build a temporary hospital. What constitutional principle governs whether the landowner must be compensated? A. Police power doctrine. B. Takings clause of the Fifth Amendment. C. Fee simple absolute. D. Rule against perpetuities. Answer: B. Takings clause of the Fifth Amendment. Explanation: the takings clause states that private property cannot be taken for public use without just compensation. Even for emergency use, compensation is required. Other options are incorrect. A. Police power doctrine allows zoning but does not permit uncompensated takings. C. Fee simple absolute is a property ownership type, not a constitutional principle. D. Rule against perpetuities limits future land interests. Question 14. In a complex negotiation where multiple lenders are involved, a borrower defaults on a mortgage leading to a foreclosure sale. Which legal doctrine ensures that junior lien holders are paid only after senior lien holders? A. Doctrine of equitable redemption. B. Doctrine of prior appropriation. C. Doctrine of lien priority. D. Fee simple defeasible. Answer: C. Doctrine of lien priority. Explanation: lien priority follows a first in time, first in right principle. Senior liens are paid first in foreclosure proceedings. Other options are incorrect. A. Doctrine of equitable redemption allows homeowners to repay debts before foreclosure. B. Doctrine of prior appropriation applies to water rights. D. Fee simple defeasible concerns conditional ownership rights. Question 15. While reviewing a process that needs improvement, a commercial landlord refuses to renew a tenant's lease due to the tenant's race. Under what federal law is this discrimination illegal? A. Fair Housing Act FHA. B. Sherman Antitrust Act. C. Statute of Frauds. D. Doctrine of Lashes. Answer: A. Fair Housing Act FHA. Explanation: the Fair Housing Act 1968 prohibits discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status in housing. Other options are incorrect. B. Sherman Antitrust Act regulates monopolies. C. Statute of Frauds governs contract requirements. D. Doctrine of Lashes prevents legal claims after excessive delays. Question 16. During a review of legal documentation, a buyer discovers that a seller does not have a clear title to the property. Which legal principle protects the buyer from acquiring a property with unresolved ownership disputes? A. Doctrine of adverse possession. B. Marketable title doctrine. C. Easement by prescription. D. Equitable conversion. Answer: B. Marketable title doctrine. Explanation: the marketable title doctrine ensures that a buyer receives clear ownership, free from liens or disputes. A seller must resolve any title defects before closing. Other options are incorrect. A. Adverse possession concerns ownership through long-term occupation. C. Easement by prescription allows land use without permission. D. Equitable conversion applies when a buyer gains equitable interest before closing. Question 17. While implementing new protocols in a residential neighborhood, a homeowners association, HOA, attempts to restrict all short-term rentals. Homeowner challenges this rule, claiming they purchased the property before the restriction. Under what legal principle might the homeowner be exempt? A. Prior non-conforming use doctrine. B. Doctrine of constructive eviction. C. Parallel evidence rule. D. Rule against perpetuities. Answer: A. Prior non-conforming use doctrine. Explanation: If an HOA or municipality changes zoning or community rules, pre-existing legal uses are often grandfathered under this doctrine. Other options are incorrect. B. Constructive eviction applies when a landlord makes a unit uninhabitable. C. Parallel evidence rule prevents introducing verbal agreements that contradict written contracts. D. Rule against perpetuities limits future land interests. Question 18. In a high-stakes environment where multiple financial interests are involved, a property owner grants a mortgage to two lenders. The first lender records their lien, but the second lender fails to do so. Which legal principle determines which lender has priority in foreclosure? A. Doctrine of lien priority. B. Doctrine of laches. C. Caveat emptor. D. Statute of frauds. Answer A. Doctrine of lien priority. Explanation. Lien priority is determined by the order of recording. The first lender to record their mortgage has senior rights in foreclosure. Other options are incorrect. B. Doctrine of laches applies when legal claims are delayed. C. Caveat emptor. Buyer beware limits a seller's liability. D. Statute of frauds requires real estate contracts to be in writing. Question 19. During a complex negotiation where multiple parties have interest in a property, a dispute arises over whether the tenant's lease allows for commercial use. The lease is silent on this issue. Which legal principle will courts likely apply to interpret the lease? A. Doctrine of reasonable use. B. Covenant of quiet enjoyment. C. Doctrine of ambiguity in contracts. D. Easement by necessity. Answer C. Doctrine of ambiguity in contracts. Explanation. Courts interpret ambiguous lease terms against the party that drafted the contract, usually the landlord. Other options are incorrect. A. Doctrine of reasonable use applies to water rights. B. Covenant of quiet enjoyment protects tenants from landlord interference. D. Easement by necessity allows access when no reasonable alternative exists. Question 20. While reviewing a process that needs improvement, a city amends zoning laws, preventing a property owner from building additional structures. The owner argues this violates their property rights. Under what legal principle can they challenge the restriction? A. Regulatory taking under the Fifth Amendment. B. Doctrine of easement termination. C. Marketable title doctrine. D. Fee simple to feasible. Answer A. Regulatory taking under the Fifth Amendment. Explanation. A regulatory taking occurs when government restrictions significantly reduce a property's economic value, triggering just compensation requirements under the Fifth Amendment. Other options are incorrect. B. Doctrine of easement termination applies to easements, not zoning. C. Marketable title doctrine ensures clear title but does not affect zoning. D. Fee simple to feasible refers to ownership subject to conditions. Question 21. During an emergency response where multiple properties are impacted, the government temporarily restricts private property use without compensation. Under which principle might a property owner challenge this action? A. Police power doctrine. B. Takings clause of the Fifth Amendment. C. Easement by prescription. D. Rule against perpetuities. Answer B. Takings clause of the Fifth Amendment. Explanation. If government action deprives an owner of property use, it may be considered a taking requiring compensation under the Fifth Amendment. Other options are incorrect. A. Police power doctrine allows zoning but does not require compensation. C. Easement by prescription concerns unauthorized long-term land use. D. Rule against perpetuities limits future land interests. Question 22. In a high-stakes environment where real estate investors compete for properties, a seller backs out of a signed contract just before closing. What legal remedy is available to the buyer? A. Specific performance. B. Doctrine of unjust enrichment. C. Marketable title doctrine. D. Constructive eviction. Answer A. Specific performance. Explanation. Specific performance forces a seller to complete the transaction when a contract has been legally executed. Other options are incorrect. B. Doctrine of unjust enrichment applies when someone benefits unfairly. C. Marketable title doctrine ensures a clear title but does not force sales. D. Constructive eviction applies to uninhabitable rental units. Question 23. While implementing new protocols in a commercial district, a municipality rezones an area, preventing a long-time industrial business from continuing operations. What legal protection might apply to the business? A. Prior non-conforming use doctrine. B. Parallel evidence rule. C. Doctrine of laches. D. Statute of frauds. Answer A. Prior non-conforming use doctrine. Explanation. This doctrine allows businesses to continue operations if they existed before zoning changes were enacted. Other options are incorrect. B. Parallel evidence rule limits verbal contract modifications. C. Doctrine of lashes applies to legal claim delays. D. Statute of frauds requires real estate agreements to be in writing. Question 24. During a review of legal documentation, a property owner finds an old restriction prohibiting non-residential use. What type of legal restriction is this? A. Restrictive covenant. B. Easement by necessity. C. Doctrine of waste. D. Life estate. Answer A. Restrictive covenant. Explanation. Restrictive covenants are private agreements limiting property use, often enforced by HOAs or recorded in deeds. Other options are incorrect. B. Easement by necessity grants land access. C. Doctrine of waste prevents a life tenant from damaging property. D. Life estate grants temporary property rights for a person's lifetime. Question 25. During a high-stakes negotiation where multiple parties have conflicting interests, a tenant claims the landlord is not maintaining essential services, making the property unlivable. Under what legal principle can the tenant terminate the lease? A. Doctrine of constructive eviction. B. Doctrine of equitable conversion. C. Rule against perpetuities. D. Prior non-conforming use doctrine. Answer A. Doctrine of constructive eviction. Explanation. If a landlord fails to provide essential services, e.g. water, heat, a tenant may terminate the lease and vacate under constructive eviction. Other options are incorrect. B. Equitable conversion applies to property sales, not leases. C. Rule against perpetuities limits future property interests. D. Prior non-conforming use doctrine applies to zoning changes. Question 26. While reviewing a process that needs improvement, a developer wants to build a shopping center in an area zoned for residential use. What legal option allows them to proceed despite the restriction? A. Variance. B. Easement by prescription. C. Doctrine of lashes. D. Life estate. Answer A. Variance. Explanation. A variance is an exception to zoning laws granted by a municipality to allow non-conforming land use. Other options are incorrect. B. Easement by prescription concerns unauthorized long-term land use. C. Doctrine of lashes applies to legal claim delays. D. Life estate grants temporary ownership rights for a person's lifetime. Question 27. In an emergency response where multiple properties are impacted, a government agency temporarily seizes land without compensation. What legal principle might property owners use to challenge the action? A. Takings clause of the Fifth Amendment. B. Marketable title doctrine. C. Caveat emptor. D. Statute of frauds. Answer A. Takings clause of the Fifth Amendment. Explanation. The government must provide just compensation when taking private property for public use under the takings clause. Other options are incorrect. B. Marketable title doctrine ensures a clear title but does not apply to government actions. C. Caveat emptor biabuer applies to real estate transactions. D. Statute of frauds requires real estate contracts to be in writing. Question 20. While implementing new protocols in a real estate transaction, a seller includes a restriction in the deed limiting the property's future use. What type of legal control is being applied? A. Restrictive covenant. B. Easement by necessity. C. Doctrine of waste. D. Fee simple absolute. Answer A. Restrictive covenant. Explanation. Restrictive covenants are private agreements in deeds that limit how future owners can use the property. E.g. no commercial buildings. Other options are incorrect. B. Easement by necessity grants access rights. C. Doctrine of waste applies to preventing property damage. D. Fee simple absolute is the most complete form of ownership without restrictions. Question 29. During a review of legal documentation, a buyer learns that an older home is subject to an easement allowing public access through the backyard. What impact does this have on ownership rights? A. The new owner must honor the easement. B. The new owner can remove the easement at any time. C. The easement expires when the property is sold. D. The easement is automatically invalidated under zoning laws. Answer A. The new owner must honor the easement. Explanation. Easements run with the land, meaning they remain in effect even after the property is sold unless legally terminated. Other options are incorrect. B. The owner cannot remove the easement unilaterally. C. Easements do not automatically expire upon sale. D. Zoning laws do not cancel easements. Question 30. In a high-stakes environment where investors are competing, a property owner grants two mortgages on the same property. The first lender records their lien, but the second lender does not. Which lender has priority in foreclosure? A. The first lender who recorded their lien. B. The lender with the larger loan amount. C. The lender with the lower interest rate. D. The lender with the more recent agreement. Answer A. The first lender who recorded their lien. Explanation. Lien priority follows the first in time, first in right rule. The first recorded mortgage has senior priority in foreclosure. Other options are incorrect. B. Loan amount does not determine priority. C. Interest rate does not affect lien priority. D. A more recent agreement does not override a recorded lien.